If you've never seen my wife before, well, you're about to meet her, because it's literally been 3 years since she's come on the channel, and I finally convinced her to come back on because it's our 10-year wedding anniversary. So I think you're going to like what she's going to share with you right now.
This is the story of how God changed my life. You often hear the question, people will say, well, you're only a Christian because you were brought up in a Christian home, That's the only reason that you believe what you believe, because it's what your parents believed and it's all you've ever known. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth in my story. So I did not grow up in a Christian home. In fact, there was no religious influence in our home at all. We would be what you describe as an atheistic family. So the belief that there is absolutely no afterlife, there is no chance of there being a God. So that was our belief system growing up. As children, we wouldn't have Bibles in the home. Interestingly, I went to so over here in the UK, we have schools which can be funded by the Church of England. They're not necessarily evangelical Christian schools, but they would definitely have Christian morals and Christian teachings within them. So I went to a Church of England primary school because my dad's family, they were Catholic, and they wanted us as children to have some kind of religious input because there was absolutely none coming from the home. And I remember really vividly, I was 6 years old, and once a month we would have an assembly with a special visitor who was a Christian evangelist, and he would come in and he would tell us all a story. We'd sing some hymns on his guitar, and that would be that. But I remember really vividly this one particular assembly when he told a story, and it was very simple, about how a boy had lied to his friend about a bike. And it really, really struck me because that morning my mum said, Emma, have you eaten your breakfast? And I was like, yeah, I've eaten it all, knowing full well I hadn't eaten all my breakfast. I'd put it in the bin. And the Christian evangelist, he never mentioned the word hell. He never mentioned judgment. He never mentioned any scare tactics, if you will. I know sometimes people will say, oh, well, you were scared into your faith. There was none of that. He just said how even as children, we do things wrong. And that really struck me, to the point where I was sat in floods of tears in this assembly at 6 years old. It was a real deep conviction that I had lied to my mum. Why did I lie to my mum? Why did I do that? I obviously didn't want to get into trouble, but why did I feel that need to do something wrong? And it really, really struck me. And I remember all my little friends around me were like, Emma, what's the matter? Like, why are you upset? Because let's be honest, most kids at 6 years old in an assembly just kind of sit gazing out the window, picking the nose. But I can see now, looking back, how God had his hand upon me even at that young age. So I went home that evening and I was like, Mum, we need to go to church. We need to know more about Jesus. And she was like, well, absolutely no way, because that's not true. It's not real. That was her viewpoint. So I felt really conflicted inside because I was thinking, well, why would this teacher say that Jesus is this wonderful person that gives us hope, and yet my mum's like, well, he doesn't even exist? And I just wouldn't let it go, to the point where my mum actually went into the school. She kicked off a bit of a stink, basically saying that, I was becoming obsessive with wanting to know more about Jesus and religion. And it got so bad that she actually pulled me out of that school and she put me into what's called a community primary school. So over here, that just basically means that the school is funded by the local council. There is no church influence or any kind of religious influence going on in that school. Yes, you would do religious studies, but it was very much just factual level. So I was put in this community school, and amazingly, a few weeks after I started, the Christian evangelist got a contract at this community school to come and take an assembly once a month. But I was banned from his assemblies, so I wasn't allowed to go down and listen to what he had to say. But I remember really vividly, he would walk past me. I used to have to sit in like this little library area. Well, everybody went down and he'd be the last person to go down. And I remember every time he passed me, he'd say, good morning, Emma. I hope you have a good day, general chit chat. He was so friendly to me and I was mortified. Like, I didn't want to give him eye contact because I knew my mum had gone into the other school and, made him question, had he said things that were scaring children into wanting to believe in God, which he hadn't. So I was a bit like, oh no. But it really struck me how he just had such a genuine care and love for me. Like, he would have been within his rights to just walk on past me and think, oh, there's that girl with the, troublemaking family. But no, he was so loving towards me. So that always stuck with me. Like I said, I was just 6 years old at this point. So then life kind of happens. My mum and dad got divorced when I was 8 years old. That was a very messy divorce. There was a lot of violence, a lot of pain. We actually had to go and live in what's called like safe housing for a year. So basically my dad had no contact with us. He wasn't allowed to know our address, where we were living. And then you kind of think, well, okay, it's traumatic and it's horrendous as a child to experience that. But also there was a sense of relief when the divorce happened, because we were like, we're safe now as a family and we can be happy. And it was really lovely because my mum used to say, when we get our new house, we're going to call it the happy home. But sadly, it was far from the happy home. So at this point, I think I would have been coming up to about 9, 10 years old, probably 10 years old at this point. And my mum, she always sees the best in everybody. And she met a man who had recently just come out of prison. He had a lot of issues, but he was a bit like a Jekyll and a Hyde character. He had this really amazing side to him where he was so gifted. He was an incredible artist, incredible singer, very caring, loved nature. And then he had this other side, which was really aggressive and angry and violent and bitter. And that side was tied up with a lot of dependency upon alcohol. So that was really difficult. I think my mum, she just wanted to help him. She wanted him to become a better man, and she always felt like she could fix these people. But yeah, our family home, there was a lot of pain there, and I just wanted to be away from it. So, life is kind of just going on. I had a lot of anxiety growing up. I had a lot of big questions. What is the point to life? What's the meaning? Is there any meaning? Could there be something after death? All these kind of questions. And I just felt like there were no answers to them. So I just kind of threw myself into my studies, my friendship groups, doing your typical teenage things, going out to the clubs and the pubs. And funny enough, I never actually went down the whole route of drinking alcohol. I think because I'd seen the damage that it had caused in our family home, there was already a bit of a wariness towards it. And I genuinely didn't like the taste. So I was like, why would I spend all that money on something which tastes like you're drinking acid? So that was just me. But I was very much involved with the crowds that were out drinking because it kept me out of the home. I worked 4 jobs by the time I turned 16 because I just wanted to, I guess, escape and keep busy. So that's what I did. And then speed up a little bit more to when I had just turned 18 and I was a few weeks off going to university. One of my friends had said, let's go to this music festival, big music festival called Leeds Fest. So Leeds is a place in the UK for anybody watching this overseas. And yeah, they're just this huge farmer's field, and there are loads of bands playing music. There's food stalls, you camp there. But there is a lot of immorality happening there. There's a lot of drinking. There's a lot of promiscuous behaviour. You name it, it's all going on at this festival. And here I am, stone cold sober, with all these people that are intoxicated. And it was one particular night, early hours of the morning, and I remember just standing in this sea of young people. Like, there were thousands and thousands of teenagers, and they were all just so lost. They all just looked so incredibly lost, like just so intoxicated, just they didn't know who they were, where they were, what they were doing. There were people hooking up, and I'm like, you've not even a clue who that person is. And it was just, I felt so incredibly lost and isolated, and I felt a real sense of dread and panic. And it's hard to put into words. I don't know if anybody watching this has ever suffered with panic attacks or anxiety, but can't really explain or describe the feeling, the sensation. It's just a real sense of dread, panic, fight, flight mode. It's awful. And I remember just feeling incredibly lost and empty, thinking, I remember the thought going through my mind was, what's the point? What is the point of life? If this is all we live for, if this is the big high at the end of a working week, or, you work in a dead-end job, or even a career that you're really happy with, but why? What's the point? Just so that you can have a week getting drunk and sleeping around? And is this what pleasure is? Because it's really empty to me. And I just thought there's no point to life. If there's nothing more, if there's nothing greater than this temporary fulfillment, temporary happiness, then it is absolutely pointless. So I'm feeling all these feelings, feeling really like, to be honest, I probably looked the most intoxicated in that moment, ironically. But I looked up from all these people and I saw a tent like halfway down the field. And this tent was a Salvation Army tent. At the time, I just thought they were volunteers for the army, because you would have different tents at these festivals, like gazebo style tents. They might be selling hoodies and sweatpants, and they might be selling, you know, little key rings or whatever. But this particular tent was a Salvation Army, and they were young people similar age to me, and they were offering help and aid to all these intoxicated people, and they had such a joy about them and a peace, and it was just radiating from them. And I was like, how can you stand here, because you're sober like I'm sober, how can you stand here and watch what is happening and not be troubled by it, and also not be angry and think, you know, leave them in the pit of despair, because they've done that to themselves. Why are you carrying them to the medical tent? Why are you carrying them to a paramedic? Why are you giving them free water and wrapping them in thermal blankets? Why are you doing that? And you're doing that with such a joy about you. So I just knew in that moment those people had something that I quite clearly didn't have and I wanted. So I just walked over to this tent. Again, remember, I'm all mixed up with these feelings and I just didn't know what to say. So I said something along the lines of, I want what you have. How can I have it? And I remember this young guy, he just looked at me and he probably thought, you know, she's intoxicated. But he just looked at me and he just said, I mean, you know, you can buy a wristband, you know, that would be helpful. That would support us. So I just nodded and I was like, yeah, okay, I'll buy a wristband. Because I just didn't know what to say or what to do. So I bought this wristband, and on the wristband it said salvation. I sadly don't have that wristband anymore. It just basically disintegrated into nothing because I wore it every day. Every single day, whether I was in the bath, in the shower, in the swimming pool, I did not take that bracelet off. I had no idea what salvation meant, but for me, that wristband represented the thing that I was searching for, that peace, that security, that joy. So a few weeks after that festival, I think it was maybe 4 weeks after that festival, I started university. And there was a Christian on my course who sat next to me one particular day, and this Christian said, "Oh, are you a believer?" And I was like, what a weird question. A believer? A believer in what? And they were like, "Oh, I'm really sorry. It's just like you're wearing a wristband that says salvation. That's a Christian term. Like, are you a born again Christian?" And I just laughed in this person's face. I was quite rude actually. And I was like, absolutely no way. Like, no, I'm absolutely not a Christian. Like, everybody knows that that's just a made up fairy tale book to help people cope with the difficulties of life. Like, it's not real. So then this person was like, "Well, why are you wearing a Christian wristband then if you've no interest?" And I was like, well, you know, and I didn't know what to say. And they were like, "You do know what salvation means, don't you?" And I was like, yes, of course I know what salvation means. When actually I hadn't a clue what salvation meant. I still thought the Salvation Army worked for the army. So that then made me think, okay, I need to go away and Google what is salvation. So that's exactly what I went away and did. And that's when the penny dropped. I was like, okay, so the Salvation Army, they're Christians. And salvation, wow. I mean, this is like the whole message of Christianity. So then I was faced with almost this dilemma. Like, I felt like I was at a bit of a crossroads, because I was like, those people at that festival had what I want, but they were Christians. And I've spent my whole life thinking, you know, Christianity is a load of rubbish. It's nonsense. And I've always been very close to my mum. And obviously, you know, she wouldn't lie to me. Why would she tell me Jesus and God isn't real? Because if it was real, she would have told me it was real. And if she's telling me it's a lot of rubbish, then it's a lot of rubbish, right? You know, because you trust the word of your parents. So I was faced this real dilemma of, well, do I explore Christianity, or do I just say, oh, well, actually, it's a load of rubbish. They were just, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. It's a false sense of security those people had at the festival. And for a little while, I battled with this thought in my mind until I came to a place where I thought, you know what, I'm a hypocrite because I'm saying I'm not willing to pursue Christianity or investigate any further because I know it's rubbish. I know it's nonsense. I know it's not real. When actually I've never considered it truly for myself. I've never read a Bible. I don't even own a Bible. I've never been in an evangelical church, a Bible believing church. I've only ever been to funerals, christenings, weddings. I've never considered this. So that makes me a really big hypocrite. And I think when you're at university, you're studying, aren't you? You're in the world of academia, let's say, and you're wanting to debate and discover who you are and what is this big world we live in. So there was also that side of it where I was like, I want to explore this. I want to see what is this Christianity all about. So that's what I did. So I got myself a Bible. I started to read the Bible. The Christian who I'd met on the course that had challenged me, they put me in touch with a local church to the university that I was at. And I remember I didn't go for a good few weeks because I was so worried about how they would judge me, how would they view me. Bear in mind, I had no concept of what a Christian worship service was like. So I thought, you have to wear like a big funny hat and you have to wear like floor length clothing. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just thought that's what you have to wear, and you'll be sprinkled with holy water at the door and they'll just judge me as like the world's biggest sinner. And I was terrified that it was going to be this place of fear and judgment. But I eventually, again, I got to a point where I was like, I just need to swallow my pride and go. So I did. And let me tell you, it was nothing like the picture I had conjured up in my mind. Nobody sprinkled me with holy water, you'll be pleased to know. I didn't wear a funny hat or floor-length clothing. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing, to be honest, because obviously coming from a broken home, you see a lot of dysfunction going on and there's a lot of arguments and pain and nobody seems to get along. To then walk into a building, a very basic building. There was nothing fancy. There was no stained glass windows. It was just a very bog standard basic building. To see people from all different walks of life, different races, different class type. You had rich, you had poor, you had young, you had old, you had disabled, you had really intelligent people. You had people that quite clearly were not in good circumstances. To see such a mix of people in the same building with such unity, that really, really struck me. That was the thing that had the biggest impact upon me, because I just remember thinking, this is what a family is. Like, they have such a bond that just clearly cannot be broken. And humanly speaking, there should be absolutely nothing that these people have in common. Like, these people should not be getting on as well as they are. So why are they? What is it that is uniting them to one another? So that spoke volumes to me, to see that love, that family unity. I was like, wow, this is pretty profound. This is pretty real. So I kept going back to that church and I kept reading the Bible, and I came to a place where I felt like for the first time a lot of my questions were being answered. Because if you truly, truly study Christianity and the Bible and the historical accounts of creation, you'll find that that is the most scientific explanation for how we have ended up here with this incredible universe. We can't have the creation without a creator. Everything that has ever been created has intelligent design behind it. So I felt like all my questions were being answered. I was like, yes, this makes sense. Yes, this all makes sense. Life suddenly makes sense. There is a bigger picture. There is a God in heaven and he loves me. But I got to a point where I thought that being a Christian was just about being a good person, living a good life, doing good things, not swearing, not lying, being kind to people that you don't really want to be kind to. So every day I remember I'd wake up and I'd be like, okay, today's the day that I'm going to be a Christian. I'm gonna not swear, and I'm not gonna do this at work, and I'm gonna just be a really good, wholesome person. And sure enough, I'd fail miserably. So then I got quite disillusioned with Christianity. I started to think they're all hypocrites. It's a hypocritical religion because you can't keep this standard of perfection. Nobody can live this way. I mean, it's impossible. So I felt like on the one hand, I wanted to throw the towel in, but on the other hand, I knew that I can't let this go because I found so much truth in the scriptures. So then one particular night, I was actually doing my Bible reading for the day. I used to write out certain passages just to help them stick in my mind because, like I said, this is the first time I've ever picked up a Bible for myself and started to read for myself. So I was writing out Psalm 51, which is the repentance psalm of King David. And it's as I was writing out verse 7, which says, "Wash me and then I'll be whiter than snow." And I remember as I'm writing it, I'm like, wash me and then I'm whiter than snow. And I remember putting the pen down and being like, oh, I get it. How could I miss this? I get it. It's not about what we do. It's not about us keeping this perfect standard, because if I could get to heaven on my own steam, off my own good works, then Jesus died in vain. No. It is finished. We trust in the finished work of Christ. It's all him. It is all him. And it was like this real ding, like light bulb moment that there's nothing I can offer him. There's nothing that I can give him. There's nothing that I can do. He has done it all. He is the sinless one that has died for the sinner, and I need to give him my life. And I remember in that moment just putting my pen down and just praying to him and just saying, I know that there is nothing I can do to be saved. You have done it all. Please save me. Save me from my sins. I turn from them. Give me the strength daily to follow you. And it was that moment that I truly repented of my sin. I think I'd already reached a point where I believed in God. I believed in Jesus. There's no way I could have doubted their existence, but I hadn't repented of my sin. I hadn't been born again. You know, even the devil believes in God, but it doesn't mean he's saved. And I think that was the moment that Jesus saved me. So that Psalm 51, is very precious to me. In fact, I really encourage anybody to go give that a read. You could spend a lifetime alone meditating on those words. So since then, since that moment, it's been amazing, the journey that the Lord's taken me on. Your life doesn't become perfect. In fact, far from it. You face a lot of persecution. I lost a lot of friends. They were all like, you've gone crazy, you know, why aren't you coming into the nightclubs anymore? You know, you never used to drink, so you're fine to still come in the nightclubs. I wasn't laughing at the same crude jokes they were all laughing at. I wasn't watching the same programs they were watching. And so to them, it was like, oh, well, it's like Emma's died. It's like she's no longer here. Like that you're this different person. And I remember talking to a friend. We drifted apart, and before we were really close, but we drifted apart. And I remember we met up for a coffee, and I think she really appreciated it because I was able to just explain to her how, you know, my life is so different now. I'm not living for the weekend anymore. I'm not living for the temporary pleasure of a nightclub and a dance floor. I'm living for the King. You know, my whole perspective has changed. And I think, because it was a radical transformation, and I had peace and I had joy even amongst so many difficulties in life. I just was filled with such a peace and a contentment that I know where I'm going, and I know that my life has purpose and meaning, and there's so much more than this. And I think that's the biggest thing I would encourage anybody who's listening. If you don't know Jesus, if you're not saved, my challenge to you would be, what have you got to lose? You know, you have nothing to lose by going out there and genuinely, seriously, with sincerity, searching the scriptures for yourself. So, you know, that is God's word to us. That is him speaking to us. Just consider it for yourself.